Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to share something with you. And I was sitting down and I was talking to my wife the other night. And I was basically telling my wife that if you really truly want to know who I am as an individual, get to understand me. Find out what it is that I'm passionate about. Find out what it is that find out what it is that I'm reading. What books am I reading? What materials are you really taking the time to really study and get understanding from? And the reason I say that is because in the 21st century, we're on a whole totally different platform. A lot of things that my wife and I experienced growing up in the 20th century is totally different from what it is in the 21st century. Now, we were two kids that were born in the 70s, back in the 20th century, and now we have a child of our own. And the reason I'm doing this story is because I can relate having a 10-year-old child that society has labeled attention deficit hyperactive disorder, Asperger's, um, autistic like. And I think personally, this is really just a bunch of bullshit. It's really a bunch of bullshit to keep these kids doped up on medication to try to control them and try to dominate them. And when things don't work out, when their bodies don't react to the amphetamines and the drugs that you're giving them, and you just have a hard time dealing with the kids, then you want to come here with your code ones and your code twos and your code 666s and all that shit, and then call the parents and tell the parents, come pick them up, come get them. We can't deal with the bullshit anymore. So I am a person like Pastor Dow. I believe that you really do need to get your kids out of this public fool system, because the schools are not adequate and properly situated to really deal with the kids. And I'll never forget, I was telling my son's kindergarten teacher before they decided years ago to hold him back. I said these children, and I used a biblical reference of what Christ had talked about when he talked about a man having 100 sheep and one goes astray out of that 100, so you have 99. So the man leaves the 99 sheep to go look for that one. And I've always said that my son, if you take the time out with him and give him that one-on-one development, if you stay with him, if you teach him, if you show him, if you lead him and guide him into the right areas of truth, he will become a great person. But the problem is today is when you look at these districts and you look at these zones, they're cramming and jamming more kids into these classrooms. This is why classrooms have 30, 40, 50 kids in them, and 5 or 6 of these kids are going to go off the beaten path. I even told that to when my son was in daycare, and I even told that to one of the daycare teachers. I was like, why don't you just put my son up front? That way he's much easier to control and he's easier to discipline, instead of putting him in the back. And then when he does something that he's not supposed to do, you want to pick up the phone and call me like, oh, come get him. I don't want to be bothered with him. But I remember my sister had told me something a long time ago. She said that if you want to put something in a book, especially for us Negroes, if you want to hide some truth from us, put it in a book, because 9 times out of 10, most people don't read. And this is why I try to break that stigma. I try to get out of that. I try to get out of that monotony. I try to get out of that rut of being closed-minded and letting the fake news and the fake media always give me the information that I need. I'm one of those type of people. I don't watch television. And it's enough dumbing down in the world going on right now. It's too much of that dumbing down going on right now to even try to even be entertained, or what, as most folks say, detained for entry. So I'm going to go ahead and read this story here. And I want to give a shout out to Skip Alvis for this story here. I came across a story on the timeline, and this brother here, he really keeps up with a lot of stories that come out in the news and stuff like that. And I just want to give him a shout out, and hopefully I'll give him more shout outs and kudos and all that good stuff in the near future. But this story comes out of Alabama, and the title of it is called "Teachers Are Walking Away from Their Careers in Mobile County Because of Unruly Students." It can be tough to be a teacher. According to a study released last year by the Economic Policy Institute, nearly 14% of America's teachers are either leaving their school or leaving teaching altogether, and school systems are having a hard time replacing them. Often it's because of the pay, but a growing lack of respect for the profession is also to blame. NBC 15's Darwin Singleton spoke to one teacher who called it quits after just 2 months of being on the job. 2 months. That's how long this former Mobile County public school teacher lasted in the classroom, and he says his departure had everything to do with a lack of students, discipline, and support. It tainting you on teaching, asked Darwin Singleton. Completely, he said. He asked that we conceal his real identity because students are still trying to contact him through social media. But he doesn't respond. They looking for you. They looking for you, man. After 4 years of college and thousands in student loans, this former middle school science teacher called it quits. He began having his doubts, he said, from the very first day. He was told he'd teach about 24 students per class. The reality was between 32 and 36. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. I remember Robert Kiyosaki had talked about this in one of his Rich Dad, Poor Dad audios, where he was talking about a couple years back, I think it was like 2006 or 2007, the California public school system was getting ready to hold back thousands of graduates because they didn't have enough credits to pass or graduate from high school. And so Robert Kiyosaki was saying the problem with the education system, and I totally agree with what he's saying. I agree. I 100% totally agree with what he's saying. The problem with the educational system is that it is an outdated old system that is hundreds of years old. The problem is when our students get out of high school, they lack financial education. So what happens is when my son gets out of high school years from now, if I don't stay on top of him, and if I don't step up and do what it is that I have to do as far as training up my child in the way that he should go, so when he gets old, he won't depart from it. He's gonna come out of school, and the first thing that's gonna happen to him is that he's gonna want to go and get student loans to go to college. If I don't teach him the skills of financial literacy. So what has happened is that you have an old system in place that has taught these kids, go to school, make good grades, so you can get a safe, secure job with benefits. Now, back in the 50s and the 60s, and I remember my father was telling me this, you actually had people who could drop out of school at 15, 16, 17 years old and go out to the refinery and get a job making $80,000, $90,000 a year. You can't do that today. Matter of fact, there are jobs that won't even take a high school diploma or a GED equivalent. And if you're going to be a manager, you definitely have to have a college degree. So now the way the workplace is looking, especially in the IT world, which is something that I can relate to, you definitely either have to have a college degree or you definitely have to have certifications. Okay, so back to the science teacher. Like I was saying earlier, you want your classrooms to be smaller, not bigger. This is the reason why when you have over 20 kids, it's hard to maintain that classroom. So the guy was told he would teach about 24 students per class. The reality was between 32 and 36. And for some of these students, and some of those students made it impossible for him to teach and for others to learn. Having students playing video games on their phone, just getting up, walking around, yelling at each other as if they were just hanging out of the house instead of at school, where they were to learn, he said. He says when he tried to reason with the troublemakers, he was ignored. And when he asked for help from the school's administration, he seldom, if ever, got it. I'll never forget a couple years ago, I believe when my son was in the first or second grade, he had a meltdown in his classroom, and so what happened was the assistant principal would call me and is like, we need you to come get your son. And so after a while, between the reports that I was getting from the school teachers and from my wife, I had to sit down and I literally had to lay down the law. I had to find out what the hell was going on. And I started to put two and two together, and I realized that my son, he has a beautiful personality. You know, when people first meet him, they love him. They love him to death. But eventually, after a while, what happens is people can get burnt out and tired of the just the bad little ways that people have. And so what happens is people let things slip through the cracks. Like, for instance, a while back, there's a stage inside the auditorium, which is I think it's an auditorium cafeteria. And so my son decided that he wanted to do something for attention a while back. So he decides that he wants to go on stage, which he is not allowed to go on stage, period, unless there is a school function going on. So he decided he wanted to go on stage and run around the stage and grab their cordless mics. And so he broke three of the cordless microphones. And so the school decides to send this paper home with him and saying, okay, this is how much the microphones cost, and that in the near future we may have to send you a bill if this situation continues. So I sat there and I told my wife, I said, first of all, my son wouldn't have been on no goddamn stage. First of all, he wouldn't have been on no stage at all, period. Because if I was that teacher or if I was that administrator, I would have said, hey, come with me. Come hang out with me for a little bit. Or I would have been like, hey, if I find you going on that stage, I'm going to call your daddy. I'm going to call your mama. And I've told the school, if you have any issues, if you have any problems, you call me. You call me. If I got to take off of work, I will come and deal with it. And by the way, we don't do torture in my house either. We don't hog tie our kids up. All right, so let me get back to reading this story here. Now it's a lot of things in this story I totally agree with the teacher's perspective. Okay, so he says when he tries to reason with the troublemakers, he was ignored. And when he asked for help from the school's administration, he seldom, if ever, got it. Write him up, write him up, write him up was just kind of the thing. Write them up, and if they get so many write-ups, then we'll deal with it then. No specific number, just write them up, and at some point we'll try to address the behavior that way. Then it was call the parents, write them up, and call the parents, he said. This teacher is not alone in bailing from the profession because of behavior related to issues in the classroom. It's taking a toll on teacher retention. Like many states, Alabama is dealing with a teacher shortage and has been for several years. The problem is so bad that last year, the State Department of Education created a task force to study the problem, producing an 8-page report recommending solutions. Those solutions included better incentives like more money, loan forgiveness, streamlining the process of certifying new teachers, but nowhere in the report was the problem of the student behavior addressed. And teaching teachers about dealing with behavior issues doesn't appear to be a high priority item. When asked, the University of South Alabama, a prime source of teachers in Mobile County, if we could see a class focused on dealing with student behavior, we were told there isn't one. A lot of them just get up and quit, or a lot of them just don't come to us. They just come to us afterwards and say, well, I'll just resign, said Abigail Davis, a representative of the Alabama Education Association who assists teachers in Mobile. She recognizes that behavioral problems don't start at school. They're often brought from home. And that's true. That is true. When you let your kids sit up there for 30 to 40 to 60 hours a week playing Fortnite and playing with their iPad and watching silly, crazy stuff that's on YouTube, which is geared towards sex trafficking, which is geared toward pedophilia, and geared to all kind of other bullshit, then the kids leave from home and they go to school and they don't respect these teachers. They don't respect this. They don't respect the staff. That is a part of a mental state of the child coming into the classroom, Davis says. So if they're not addressed for those behaviors at home, why would they think it's any different coming into the classroom? So what is the Mobile County school system doing to help struggling teachers? A spokesperson says there are several options. The teacher can talk to their supervisor and human resources administrator. They can tap into the system's employee assistance program for help with stress management. And the system encourages teachers to consult their classroom mentor, an experienced teacher that is paired with new educators to help them work through the problems they've already faced. That was something this former teacher says he did on several occasions, but found his mentor to be of little help. I believe it. I can believe it. I remember sitting down talking to my son's family counselor, and we had agreed that if push came to shove, that we would go ahead and we would try to get some kind of what they call like a buddy mentor teaching assistant. And this is something that we would have to pay for out of pocket, and I believe that we would have been able to pay for it through my company's healthcare insurance. And so basically what that meant was, because your son is going through a behavioral program or some kind of psychological program, that you are allowed to provide him with a mentor or some kind of someone who can assist the teacher in basically kind of giving one-on-one teaching and training to your son. So basically we would have had access to have a mentor or some kind of assistant to help the teacher as far as helping my son staying focused with his studies, such as math and reading, his handwriting. And that would have prevented a lot of outbursts and a lot of negativity that would have happened in the classroom. So what happened was, when that was addressed during my son's IEP session, then the school got shit scared, and it was like, nah, we'll just take care of it, and we'll handle everything from here. And so the school began to realize that when you were starting to bring in the big guns, it was like, nah, that's gonna make us look bad, and that's probably gonna screw up our numbers and everything, and so we got to give the government this impression that we've got everything together, that we can handle our shit, we can take care of our shit. But just know, we still have that option on the table. All right, so where am I at? But what he saw during his 2-month stint at Mobile County Middle School isn't easy to forget. It came out a student brought a gun to school and had taken pictures of himself and other students in a bathroom mirror, he said. The student had already been removed from school for other things, but it still kind of made me wonder if having marijuana on campus and bringing guns is just kind of a thing that just happens. At what point is it going to just escalate from that? The Mobile County public school system also offers its teachers a program called, quote, Capturing Kids' Hearts. It's designed to create an atmosphere of environment for learning that the student might not experience at home. This is crazy, man. This is really crazy, like how far the American public food system has gotten. And again, like Robert Kiyosaki is saying, you're dealing with an outdated system that we're still trying to keep on. We're still trying to keep this up, and we're trying to show the world that we retain the best students out into the real world. When the majority of our kids wind up either they wind up being drug users or drug dealers, or they wind up being drug pushers. I remember that my dad had told me something the year that I graduated, and he told me this out of love. He was like, look, I want you to go up to that school. I want you to do what you got to do and come on home. Don't hang around there 5 minutes later than what you're supposed to hang around there, because you got people that's out for your ass. You need to watch yourself. And this is what I tell my son. Do what you got to do. Just make the day. If you need me, even if you need me to just come up there and hang out with you and sit down and have lunch with you, I'll be glad to take off on my lunch break and hang out with you. We have a sad ass situation here in America, folks. Even I'm guilty of that myself. Getting caught in the system of doing just like what Rihanna is saying, work, 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 work. And we let the television and the media, we let those things sit down and control and dictate our kids' lives. Our kids are playing these violent video games, everything from Fortnite to Grand Theft Auto to Fallout. And you wonder why these kids are so hostile and crazy in the classroom. Both sides are really at a lose-lose situation. Sometimes these kids need to just be pulled out of class and just given a break. Sometimes they just need to be put into a one-on-one situation. Will these schools ever address the situation? Probably not. That's why I say it's my prayer that my son will be able to finish and complete high school. He's 10 years old. And he has 8 more years to go. So please leave your comments. My hearts go out to all the teachers. Please leave your comment. Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe notification bell. And I'll see you on the next video. Shalom, 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 and salama.